Fundamentally, Sefer Vayikra is not a book of narrative. One who is looking for stories in Sefer Vayikra would be hard-pressed to find many. With one, of course, central exception, which is the story of the dedication of the Mishkan that we find in Parashat Shemini, culminating in the tragic and really shocking deaths of Nadav and Avihu. And the story of Nadav and Avihu, to a large degree, casts its shadow across the entire Sefer. That in the aftermath of the deaths of Nadav and Avihu, the whole code of Tuma and Tahara, or to use another term the Torah uses, the idea of havdala, the idea of separation, seems to follow directly from this story. And I think that this is because that this is fundamentally part of the approach to our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu that is central to Vayikra. Right? Vayikra is a book that's about Kedusha. It's a term, this idea of being Kadosh, reflecting Hashem's Kedusha, essential to how Sefer Vayikra tries to establish a dynamic of the relationship between the human and the divine. And it's something, again, that we find all over the Sefer, and that core to the notion of Kedusha is the idea of separation, right? An idea that there is a awe that we as human beings, cognizant of the distance between us and God, need to develop and respect that if we are going to have a relationship. And however we understand the exact nature of the sin of Nadav and Avihu, that somehow that they violate this notion of Kedusha, right? And the factor that links all the disparate parts of Sefer Vayikra is fundamentally this idea of various things that build this sense of distance, of boundary, of separation, which is critical for a human being to have an appropriate relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is a distance that is both born out of and perpetuates a very healthy kind of awe. It is perilous and frightening, but perhaps necessary, right? And something, again, that links all of the disparate parts of the approach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is developed by Sefer Vayikra, from the role of the Kohanim, through the ethical precepts, through the whole intricate world of Tuma and Tahara, and of course, fundamentally, the role of the Mishkan, of the Mikdash in this entire process, right? As being the physical, geographic embodiment of this concept. In Sefer Vayikra, we again and again refer to the sanctuary as the Mikdash, right? As the place of Kedusha, something which is consistent with this idea that Kedusha is about distance and boundary. In contradistinction, in Sefer Devarim, the dynamic of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is described very differently. The words that we encounter again and again in Sefer Devarim is the idea of Ahava, the idea of love, a mutual love between God and the Jewish people, and very much connected to that, the idea of Bechira, right? The idea of free will choice, right? The idea that we are called on in our reflection of God to choose Him, to choose His mitzvos, to make those decisions, and that we can take a measure of our relationship to the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has chosen us, chosen the Kohanim, chosen the Jewish people, chosen Yerushalayim, and so forth. All of that is reflective of the dynamic, the complementary dynamic that we find in Sefer Devarim. And just as the sanctuary, right, and there's the locus point of the Kedusha of Sefer Vayikra is manifest in the Mikdash, so too in Devarim, right? We come back to the place of Yerushalayim again and again, but in Devarim, right, the identity of this sanctuary is the Makom Asher Yivchar Hashem. It's the place that Hashem will choose, and the Derech Avoda, the way that we connect to God in the Beis HaMikdash, or perhaps more accurately, the Beis HaBechira, in Sefer Devarim, fundamentally is about, right, Usmachtem L'nei Hashem Elokeichem, right, of being able to find joy in that very sense of being before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So again, both of these together, I saw Rabbi Steinsaltz once quoted from the Zohar, the idea that Av and Yira, that love and awe, are the wings on which a person ascends to God. In other words, the idea that there is a dynamic, right, of, on the one hand, we have to establish boundaries, we have to create awe, we have to figure out how to do things correctly within the guidelines and parameters of halacha that are there to create such dynamic, which again is the painful message, right, of Nadav and Avihu, b'krovaya kadesh, as Moshe says, right, that kedusha is found, right, by defining those moments of closeness and proximity very, very carefully. At the same time, Sefer Devarim comes to teach us, right, that once we have established the boundaries of Sefer Vayikra, then a relationship of bechira, of ahava, and yes, of simcha, is one that can be created. And that is the dynamic that we find in the haftara for Parashat Shemini as well. Right? That in Parashat Shemini, we are first told of David's first attempts to bring the Aron to Yerushalayim, where again, the deaths of those who were transporting it very much in parallel to what we find with Nadav and Avihu dominates the beginning of the haftara. But then, when David realizes the extent of bracha, right, that having such a healthy relationship can engender, he brings the Mikdash to Yerushalayim, and the Aron to Yerushalayim, and in that transportation where David is described as dancing with all abandon before the Aron, right, that once the proper halach parameters are in place, to be able to create a space where that relationship of ava, simcha, bechira is possible, right? Very much is the story of the Haftarah. And of course, the Melech is very much a character of Sefer Devarim, right? The Melech is part of that same rubric of bechira, right? Is another agent, right, of that divine choice. And again, as we know from other sources, has an intimate relationship to the Beis HaBechira as well. That tandem relationship between these two facets of our dynamic Kadosh Baruch Hu, right? The fraught, awesome world of Sefer Vayikra, and the stakes of the lives of Nadav and Avihu on the one hand, but again, the Bechira and the Ahava of Sefer Devarim, right, brought together through the story of David HaMelech's evolving relationship to the Aron and the Beis HaMikdash, kind of brings all these things into full focus. A good Shabbos to all.